Distinguished speakers and guests, Families for Life Council members, esteemed civil servants from MSF past and present, associate professors, our dear partner organizations Focus on the Family, Center for Fathering, Moms for Life, management and staff of family service centers, honored leaders and members of religious communities, other non-profit organizations, fellow parents and friends who care about family. A very good morning. I'm Ariel Lim, chairperson of Cultivate SG, and I would like to welcome everyone to our first ever conference, or large conversation as we like to call it. Now, there are times and seasons for everyone, a time to build, a time to tear down, a time to be glad, a time to mourn, a time to grow, a time to rest, and even a time for life and a time for death. There are times for families when we go through different seasons and transit into various life stages. Now, I used to think that and there are also different times or eras for communities and countries. Now, I used to think that these times are tougher now. And the winds of change somehow blow harder compared to the idyllic breezes of past generations like that of my parents and my grandparents. But I've recently changed my mind. When thinking of Singapore, our nation, she was birthed in tumultuous times, and so were my own parents. Globally, large nations were finding their footing. In the US, it was the swinging 60s of great music, civil rights, the anti-war movement, and political upheaval. China, that had recently seen the end of millennia of dynastic rule, was also deep in the currents of change. Cultural revolution was underway, led by a new regime that emerged from the horrors of war and ensuing civil strife. Now back in our little red dot, new internal self-government, the Union, followed by a dramatic breakup with our closest neighbors, the withdrawal of British forces, labor strikes, and racial riots, the momentous enactment of the Women's Charter, legislating monogamy for most of society, and protecting women, all these within the span of a decade. Yet amid these changes, there remain some constants. And one of these, apart from our ruling party, is family. The blood ties that bind groups of people brought together by forces beyond them. And one of the few things that we, despite all our human strengths and genius, aided by advancements in science and technology, cannot fully control. It's so formative in the human experience and central to society. Now, our founding father, the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, was forceful on the influence of the family. He said Singapore depends on the strength and influence of the family to keep society orderly and maintain a culture of thrift, hard work, filial piety, respect for elders, for scholarship, and for learning. These values make for a productive people and help economic growth. Another leading theologian, the late Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, beautifully observed, and I quote, "Now what made the traditional family remarkable and a work of high religious art is what it brought together. It brought together sexual drive, physical desire, friendship, companionship, emotional kinship, and love. The begetting of children, their protection and care, their early education, their induction into an identity and a history. Seldom has any institution woven together so many different drives and desires, so many different roles and responsibilities. It made sense of the world and gave it a human face, the face of love." Yet, in our current time, for a variety of reasons, the ideals of family are breaking apart. Love is divorced from sex, childbearing divorced from marriage, the bearing of children separated from their upbringing. Marriage and family are losing their status as social ideals, as opportunities abound for individuals seeking their own place in our large world. Now, not all these changes are bad, but many of them leave society faring none the better. With change still as persistent as ever, will the ideals of family still provide the constant that we, as individuals, as communities, or as countries need? All this is not to say that family is perfect, and I'm sure none of us here will agree, and if you do, please approach me later, I'll invite you to the board of Cultivate. And I believe the times that we are in, that heavily question these family ideals, are an opportunity for us to reflect on what has worked and what hasn't, all with a keen grasp of reality and pragmatism, beyond shallow slogans and high-sounding but empty theory. To think about marriage, about its meaning, its definition, its role in society. To think of children, What structures serve their best interest? Why having children may have an element of social responsibility. And these, to think about how to support struggling families with compassion while avoiding policies that may incentivize less than ideal decisions. And these are difficult questions to raise even in these times, when all meaning is up for grabs and all truth seems relative, when individual choice seems to trump all other considerations, and when materialism sometimes eclipses the emotional and psychosocial bonds that we desperately need. It's also a time for action to support friends and family who want to form families, who are struggling with their own families, who want to have children, or who want to be family to those whose families have failed them. How do we be a part of Singapore made for families? And so Cultivate SG and its emphasis on research, education, and dialogue on family was formed for these times. Times of deep fracture, uncertainty, and upheaval in many other countries, signs of the same in our own land. Just 2 days ago, Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong said Singapore has stayed in the Garden of Eden for more than one generation, with good government, policies, committed leaders who understand what Singapore's stability and prosperity depend on. And it will take focus and investment to make it last beyond our generation. I humbly submit that a part of why Singapore worked and still works beyond our GDP, economy, and education is our bedrock of family, with marriage between a man and a woman forming a safe and nurturing environment for children to grow well, and how Singapore has emphasized this as important in our society. And this is our investment. We want to look at the constant of family and how it should move forward in our garden city, what boundaries should be held and what should be broken, what values we should keep and others to be forgotten. We thank you for your presence today and hope that the conversations, both at a personal and societal level, will make you think about your place in all this, and will give you hope that as our parents and grandparents and forebears survived and thrived in their times, so will we. And now it's time for some numbers, so I'll pass the time to our in-house researcher, Mr. Ariel Lim, to share more on our Marriage, Family and Social Discourse Survey, our first ever survey looking at wide-ranging values in society. Thank you.